The stagecoach rolled slowly into the dusty frontier town just as the evening sun painted the sky in shades of burning orange and fading gold. The few people gathered outside the general store barely looked up at first. Mail-order brides came through town from time to time. Hopeful women chasing promises written in careful letters from lonely men who needed wives out on the wild frontier. But when the stagecoach door opened that day, the silence that followed felt different, heavy, uncomfortable. A young woman stepped down slowly, gripping the rail as if the ground itself might disappear beneath her feet. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, the once blue fabric stained with dirt, and dark bruises showing through the thin cloth. A faint cut traced along her cheekbone, and her lip was swollen as though someone had struck her hard. She looked fragile, exhausted, and yet stubbornly determined not to fall apart in front of strangers. Her name was Clara Whitmore, and every step she took felt like she was walking through the remains of a nightmare she hadn't yet escaped. She had come to marry a man named Harold Pritchard, a rancher who had written gentle letters promising safety, kindness, and a new beginning far away from the crowded cities of the East. But Harold Pritchard never showed up. Instead, 3 drunken men from the saloon had greeted the stagecoach hours earlier on the road, claiming they were sent by him to escort her. By the time the coach finally reached town, Clara had learned the truth. Harold Pritchard had died weeks ago in a ranch accident, and those men had simply decided a lonely bride traveling alone was an opportunity too cruel to ignore. The driver had intervened when he realized something was wrong, forcing the men away before things became worse. But the damage had already been done. Now Clara stood in the middle of town with nowhere to go, clutching a small suitcase that carried everything she owned in the world. Whispered murmurs spread through the watching crowd. Some pitied her. Some simply stared with uncomfortable curiosity. A few shook their heads, the way people did when trouble arrived in someone else's life. Across the street, sitting quietly on the wooden bench outside the blacksmith shop, a tall cowboy watched everything unfold with silent intensity. His name was Daniel Carter, a man known in town for keeping mostly to himself. Daniel owned a small ranch just outside the valley, a stretch of land where the wind carried the smell of sage and the nights were quiet enough to hear coyotes calling from the hills. His wife had died 3 years earlier during a harsh winter, leaving him with a house that felt emptier every day. Since then, Daniel spoke little and trusted few people. But something about the sight of that battered young woman standing alone in the dust stirred something deep inside him, something protective, something fierce. He stood slowly, the creak of the bench barely audible beneath the murmuring crowd. Clara didn't notice him at first. She was too busy trying to keep her composure while the townsfolk whispered around her like distant thunder. One of the men from the saloon stepped forward again, a cruel grin spreading across his face as he looked at her. "Looks like your husband ain't coming, sweetheart," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But I'm sure someone in town could give you a place to stay tonight." The laughter that followed made Clara's stomach twist with fear. She felt the weight of their stares, the way wolves circle a wounded animal. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase until her knuckles turned pale. Then a calm voice cut through the air like a steady blade. "That's enough." The crowd turned as Daniel Carter walked forward, boots crunching softly against the dusty street. His presence carried a quiet authority that made the laughing men shift uneasily. Daniel stopped beside Clara, his tall frame casting a protective shadow over her. He studied her injuries for a moment, his jaw tightening as anger flickered behind his steady eyes. Then he looked at the men who had been mocking her. "You boys got somewhere else to be," he said quietly. The tone of his voice wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of certainty that made trouble rethink its chances. The men hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances before one of them spat into the dirt and backed away. Daniel waited until they disappeared toward the saloon before turning back to Clara. Up close, he could see how badly she was trembling despite her effort to appear strong. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind stirred dust between them, carrying the scent of horses and dry grass. Finally, Daniel tipped his hat slightly and said the words that would change both of their lives forever. "You're coming with me." Clara blinked in surprise, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. I don't even know you," she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "Name's Daniel Carter," he said. "I've got a ranch outside town. Spare room. No trouble there." His gaze softened slightly. "And you look like you could use a safe place tonight." Clara studied his face carefully. There was no cruelty there, no greedy interest like the other men had shown. Only quiet concern and a kind of loneliness that mirrored something deep inside her own heart. For the first time since the stagecoach ride had begun days earlier, she felt the smallest flicker of hope. She nodded once, barely trusting her voice. Daniel picked up her suitcase. Without another word and gestured toward the horse tied near the hitching post. As they walked away from the staring crowd, Clara felt something inside her chest loosen slightly. Like the first breath after escaping drowning water. She didn't know what awaited her on that distant ranch. She didn't know whether she could trust the silent cowboy walking beside her. But she knew one thing with certainty. Daniel Carter had stepped into her darkest moment without hesitation. And sometimes, the beginning of a miracle looks exactly like that. Before we continue this incredible journey of courage, survival, and unexpected love, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story like this one. The ride to Daniel Carter's ranch took nearly an hour. And the world slowly changed as they left the town behind. The dusty streets faded into open prairie where tall grass swayed like golden waves under the fading sunlight. Clara sat quietly on the horse behind Daniel, holding the saddle carefully, while trying not to wince whenever the movement brushed against her bruises. Daniel rode steadily, saying little, but every now and then he would slow the horse slightly whenever the trail became rough. It was a small kindness, but Clara noticed it. By the time the ranch house appeared on the horizon, a simple wooden structure surrounded by fences and a red barn, the sky had turned deep violet and the first stars were beginning to shine. The ranch felt peaceful, almost forgotten by the world. Daniel helped Clara down from the horse gently, careful not to startle her. "There's water inside," he said quietly. "And food if you're hungry." Clara stepped into the house slowly, her eyes widening slightly at the warmth inside. It wasn't fancy, but it felt safe. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the scent of coffee lingered in the air. Daniel placed her suitcase beside a small bedroom door and stepped back to give her space. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. Clara looked at him in disbelief. "Why would you help me like this?" she asked softly. Daniel paused, staring briefly at the fire before answering. "Because someone should have helped you sooner." Over the next few days, Clara began to heal slowly. The bruises faded, the swelling in her lip eased, and the fear that had wrapped around her heart like barbed wire slowly loosened. Daniel never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, he showed her how the ranch worked, how to gather eggs from the chicken coop, how to mend small tears in saddle leather, how to watch the horizon for incoming storms. Their conversation started small, but with each passing day, the silence between them became more comfortable. Yet trouble was not finished with Clara. One afternoon, the same men who had attacked her arrived at the ranch, hoping to finish what they had started. Clara saw them first from the porch, her blood turning cold as memories rushed back. But before fear could take hold, Daniel stepped out beside her, his expression calm but unyielding. The confrontation that followed was brief but decisive. Daniel Carter might have been quiet, but he was not a man anyone wanted to fight. The men left the ranch bruised and humiliated. And word spread quickly through town that Clara Whitmore was under Daniel Carter's protection. After that day, something changed between them. Clara no longer felt like a frightened guest hiding from the world. She felt like she belonged there, beside the quiet cowboy who had refused to let the world break her. Weeks turned into months, and the lonely ranch slowly transformed into a place filled with laughter again. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the porch, Daniel finally spoke the words he had been carrying in his heart. "You came here looking for a husband," he said quietly. Clara smiled softly. "Yes. But I think I found something better." Daniel looked at her with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Maybe we both did." And so the mail-order bride who had arrived beaten and broken found something she never expected: a home, a protector, and a love built not on promises written in letters, but on courage, kindness, and the simple act of one lonely cowboy saying, "You're coming with me." If this story touched your heart, and you want to hear more unforgettable stories of hope, love, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join our storytelling family.